This briefing will help you get the most out of your time on Salisbury Plain Training Area, SBTA, and make sure you leave with no damage to you, your equipment, the public, or this special environment. We facilitate safe, sustainable training. So let's start with sources of information. First and foremost, there are the range standing orders. These also contain the details you'll need to access the military intranet website, which has up-to-date information and details of the planning process. Let's have a quick look at the planning process. This consists of the following stages. The preliminary recce using the map and possibly walking the ground. All training bookings must be conducted through the Bidding and Allocation Management System, BAMS. For those not on BAMS, a JSP 907 BAMS bidding form can be found in Chapter 4 of Range Standing Orders, Part 1. Following allocation of training facilities, there'll be a deconfliction conference and then a detailed recce. The plan is then produced, submitted and executed. Always carry your aid memoir. Read it and comply with it. The primary aim of the aid memoir is to assist you when an incident occurs, and it'll guide you through the incident procedure. Also, make sure you have the current training area maps, as they do change periodically. Here are the main features of Salisbury Plain. The military training areas are highlighted, then the main public road system that runs through the training area. There's also a network of constructed stone tracks within the training areas for you to use. Public access is allowed in the blue areas, subject to the bylaws. Further guidance can be sought through HQ SPTA. Access is controlled or prohibited in the red areas. These are the small arms range danger areas at Warminster and Bulford, and the main impact areas 15 and 16. They're out of bounds at all times unless allocated by the Range Administering Unit. The out of bounds area is out of bounds at all times due to the high density of UXO threat. Area 9 is also known as the COTEC Circle. If annotated as live in the Daily Range Summary, it's out of bounds unless allocated. Areas 1 to 4 and 10 to 13 are occasionally used for live firing exercises. Details about this are announced in advance and additional safety measures are put in place. The cross-country driving area is out of bounds to all, whether on or off duty, unless it's been booked and allocated. This area is not to be used for unit PT or sporting events. Schedule 1 farmland is out of bounds to troops and vehicles at all times, unless authorised by the Range Administering Unit. It's tenant farmer land, and any damage means farmers have to be compensated. This land is shaded on the map in light brown and is often used as a buffer between the civilian population and Schedule 3 training land. Sheep and cattle are grazed in permanent pennings. These are out of bounds to vehicles but can be entered on foot if empty. Digging is not permitted in permanent pennings. In addition, some 135 temporary electric fence pennings are used across the training area. They're not lethal, but they will give you a shock, so try to avoid contact. Electric fence pennings are out of bounds to vehicles and troops on foot. The locations of these are notified on the SPTA webpage. They're moved monthly and require a minimum of 48 hours notice if you require them to be moved to facilitate training. You must submit your request prior to the deconfliction conference. If electric fences are accidentally broken, notify the 24-hour ops room immediately to prevent livestock from interfering with training or the public highways. Farmers are also granted consent to plough and plant crops in certain parts of the training area on Schedule 3 training land. Units can, if they wish, manoeuvre through ploughing consents, and should it be tactically necessary, these areas can be crossed on foot or in vehicles without the need to report damage to the crop. There are over 112 training features on Salisbury Plain training area, most of which can be booked in advance. If not allocated, they can be used on a first-come, first-served basis. Some features are secured with locked gates. If the feature is locked, access can be obtained from landmark. You should be aware that handover or takeover must be booked 48 hours in advance. Hard standings are provided at strategic locations across the plane. They're to be used for after-action reviews, leaguers, replens, or as concentration areas or offloading points, and for use in wet weather. Fenced plantations may be entered on foot using stiles. Rides and vehicle bays have been cut into mature plantations for use by vehicles training. If you need foliage as camouflage, consultation with a training safety marshal is necessary. Due to the unexploded ordnance hazard, environmental sensitivities and archaeological restrictions, no digging is permitted on Salisbury Plain without obtaining clearance from within the dry training team. All digging within SPTA is covered by legislation, and failure to comply could result in disciplinary action. As a guide, shell scrapes can be dug anywhere in the training area except in areas 15 and 16, the Warminster Range Danger Area, and in the scheduled archaeological monuments. Units must complete the detailed requirements with regards to shell scrapes and the Training Safety and Assurance Certificate. You need to make sure that when digging shell scrapes, you do not break into the chalk layer. The restoration process is mandatory, and there should be minimal evidence of the shell scrape left behind. Check the standing orders for more details on this. Units wishing to do any other digging must complete a digging request pro forma, adhere to the timeline process in range standing orders, and have it signed off by the Senior Training Safety Marshal. Remember, there is always a potential to break unmarked underground cables and pipes. If this does happen, it must be reported immediately to the 24-hour ops room. When digging on Salisbury Plain training area by hand or plant, remember to deturf, strip off the topsoil and keep it separate, and then remove the chalk layer. When backfilling, return the materials in the reverse order. Let's look at some of the special training facilities on Salisbury Plain. First of all, there are the drop zones and the landing strip. There are 4 standard drop zones: Imber, Fox Covert, Blackball Firs and Everley, and the landing strip at Deptford Down. You may be allocated an area which contains a drop zone, but you must ensure that you stay out of the designated drop zone when it is live, and drop zone allocation will be shown on your daily range summary. However, the 24-hour ops room must be consulted on a daily basis for live drop times. Troops must not dig or use any vehicle on the Deptford Down landing strip because this would threaten aircraft safety, as heavy lift aircraft cannot avoid holes or vehicles when landing or taking off. It's your responsibility to ensure that they don't have to. There are 3 military bridges across the River Avon that are connected by military roads to the tank crossings on either side of the valley. Both bridges and military roads can be closed to the public if required to allow training to be conducted safely. However, permission must be sought through the Range Administering Unit. Both bridge sites, Bravo and Charlie, can be used for engineer bridging and fording, and requests for these facilities must be part of the original bid. You should arrange for the gates to be unlocked, remove the dragon's teeth at the crossings, and replace them when you've finished. The SSI, or Site of Special Scientific Interest status of the River Avon, requires a pollution control boom to be deployed in the river by exercising units prior to any fording to prevent an oil or fuel spillage being carried downstream. Royal Engineers can extract water from the River Avon up to a maximum of 36,000 litres a day, which can be carried out at all 3 crossing sites. When it's finished with, the untreated water must be leaked back into the riverbank rather than directly back into the river. Specific rules for water extraction can be found in Range Standing Orders, Part 1, Chapter 7. It's essential that all units visit HQ SPTA and that thorough recce's are carried out on all the training areas you're going to use. In addition to the Plain Sense video, HQ SPTA will be advising units when to receive a formal unit brief. Your safety, the safety of your colleagues, and the safety of the general public are all equally important. No training exercise justifies putting people's lives at risk. So, no matter how intense the exercise gets or how much pressure you're under, Don't take risks with people's lives, including your own. Every year people get hurt, and in the past some have been killed on military exercises. So if in doubt, stop and think again. Remember, we train for operations, but we are not in an operation on the plane. Training is to be as realistic as possible within the safe place limitations on the training area. The daily range summary and backdoor training area summary are your passport to operate on the plane, whether live or drive training. They are published on our website and updated daily, subject to amendments, so phone the 24-hour ops room or visit the Unit Information Centre to check that nothing has changed since it was issued. It tells you who's training, where, when, and with what. It's important that you familiarise yourself with this document. Very rarely will you have exclusive use of a training area, so it's essential to deconflict your exercise plans with other users at the monthly deconfliction conference. This can be done on the ground for those occupying the backdoor training areas. Vehicles are the major cause of injuries and deaths on the training estate. Virtually all serious injuries and deaths that happen on Salisbury Plain are caused by vehicles being driven too fast or in an inappropriate manner for the terrain and weather conditions. Drivers and vehicle commanders need to pay attention to the following hazards: dust, ice and snow, fog and mist, wet chalk tracks, loose earth, cambered stone tracks, potholes, wet and slippery surfaces, ditches, uneven ground and tracks, wet leaves, the prevailing weather conditions, military debris, loose livestock, wild animals, and the public. All of these can and have been the cause of accidents, and where two or more are encountered, conditions can be particularly dangerous. Every type of weather encountered on the plane brings its own hazards. For example, there has been one very serious accident caused by a support vehicle carrying troops running into the back of another in thick dust and hot, dry conditions. On the other hand, wet weather and cold weather can cause drivers to lose control due to slippery conditions. SPTA is crisscrossed by chalk tracks. They can be extremely dangerous in any condition, but more specifically when wet. A dynamic risk assessment will dictate if they have to be used or avoided. The maximum speed on all roads and stone tracks in the training area is 30 miles an hour. However, weather and surface conditions may mean that you will have to reduce your speed. Remember that wheeled vehicles must give way to tracked vehicles at all times on made-up tracks. Training area staff constantly monitor vehicle movements to ensure safe training. Anyone training in a dangerous manner, including speeding, who is judged to be a danger to themselves or others, will be removed from the training area and placed in the sin bin at West Down Camp. Individuals in the sin bin can only be released back onto the exercise by the appropriate representative from their chain of command. The next biggest danger after speed is off-road driving. You must be competent to drive your vehicle cross-country. Safe off-road driving is all about careful route selection. There is a lot of steep terrain, unmapped ditches and excavations throughout the area. You need to be particularly aware of the defensive positions in Area 2 and old target trenches in Area 11, because every year these take their toll on military vehicles. Areas where vehicles are prohibited are marked by white or yellow top posts or protected by dragon's teeth. These are not to be moved without permission. They mark hidden hazards like ditches and culverts on the edges of tracks and roads, and out-of-bounds areas like archaeological sites. Wear and tear from vehicles is a major cause of environmental damage, so minimise this by using the stone tracks whenever possible. This means avoid parallel tracking, so when there is a made-up track or road available, it should be used at all times unless tactics dictate otherwise. You can help reduce damage to track edges where possible by crossing them at a right angle. However, when joining a track, do so at an acute angle. To help you develop your cross-country driving skills, there's a dedicated cross-country driving area. The planning officer must conduct a detailed recce and produce a risk assessment of uncontrolled hazards. It's to be noted that the steep slopes are only open to tracked vehicles. For blackout driving at night, both the driver and the vehicle commander must have night vision. Where possible, conduct blackout driving in the west where there are no public rights of way. While normal lighting rules apply for non-tactical driving, all night driving must consider the public rights of way, and all other users. If you can't see, don't turn the key. There are numerous public roads and rights of way which cross the training area, and these are mapped on Salisbury Plain Training Area (SPTA) maps. Once you've deployed on exercise, you should keep off the public roads whenever possible, especially when using tracked vehicles. Where wheeled vehicles must travel on local roads, you must obey the local road restrictions marked on maps and signed on the ground. Be polite and give way to civilian traffic. Where possible, when joining the training area from a public road, use the tank crossings. Tank crossings are the only crossing points to be used by any military vehicle to cross public roads from training area to training area. It's essential that units use these crossings correctly to prevent the risk of serious accidents which have occurred in the past. Single or pairs of vehicles may cross without a crossing party, but you're still responsible for cleaning mud off the road. It's mandatory for convoys of 3 or more vehicles to deploy a crossing party which consists of a crossing marshal and 2 sentries. Remember, all tank crossings are non-tactical. The correct procedure is as follows. Firstly, all vehicles must activate all lights as they approach the crossing. The convoy then stops and deploys personnel to provide the crossing party. They put on high visibility vests and the crossing party now deploys onto the crossing. Traffic sentries move an appropriate distance, left and right, away from the crossing to get a clear view of approaching road traffic from both directions. The marshal remains at the centre of the crossing point. The sentries identify a safe gap in the traffic and signal to the marshal when it's safe for the convoy to cross. Once a safe gap has been identified, the vehicle driver or commander is then signalled to cross by the marshal, and once the vehicle is on the crossing, it's the job of the crossing party to alert them about any traffic that's approaching and to signal the road traffic to slow down. The worst case scenario during a crossing is civilian traffic travelling at excessive speed, being unable to stop in time. But while sentries should vigorously warn civilian drivers of the danger, remember you should never step into the road to stop traffic, as it's unsafe and unlawful. At night, the same crossing procedure must be carried out, making sure the vehicles are fully lit as they approach the crossing and that the crossing party are equipped with torches to signal to the crossing marshal. This is a high-risk activity, and it's the convoy commander who is responsible for ensuring that it's carried out correctly, and it's recommended that day and night crossings are rehearsed. Refer to Part 1 of Range Standing Orders for more information on procedures. Your unit is responsible for removing any mud from the public highway. You should have already organised a sweeper to be ready to clean any mud off the road once the crossing is complete. The sweeper is there to assist units, not to take responsibility. If no sweeper is available, you'll need brushes to clean the road. The unit should be fully aware of the implications, i.e. the dangers to the public if they fail to carry out this task. In wet weather, when the ground becomes soft and muddy, it's sometimes necessary to restrict the use of tracked and wheeled vehicles in specific areas for the protection of the SSIs, the Sites of Special Scientific Interest. When in force, these restrictions are published on the SPTA website and shown in the Information Centre. Known dangerous areas for driving are also published for safety guidance. The final point on driving relates to the Beryl Valley, which is a sensitive conservation area and has a steep ditch along the bottom of it. Vehicles are not to attempt to cross it except at the demolition bridge sites 1 to 3 or at the fascine gaps. Let's look at some other safety issues. Pyrotechnics must not be used within 100 metres of the public highway, private property, members of the public or livestock. 1.5-inch para-lume cannot be used within 1,000 metres of the River Avon, or when low-flying aircraft are operating in the area or over Schedule 1 land. There are restrictions on the use of 1.5-inch para-lume. See Range Standing Orders Part 1, Chapter 7, Annex A, or consult the Range Administering Unit for more details about this. No pyrotechnics are allowed inside buildings other than blank ammunition and L-111 simulation grenades, and no fires are permitted inside buildings or in the training area without first consulting the Range Administering Unit. During dry weather, fires started by pyrotechnics and live ammunition are common. If a fire starts, you must suspend training activities in the immediate vicinity because priority must be given to putting out the fire before it gets out of control. But never go into the impact area without the 24-hour ops room authority. Special rules are applied during live firing, which are covered in Range Standing Orders, Part 2. Fires must be reported to the 24-hour ops room. Note that in periods of high fire risk, a pyrotechnic ban may be enforced. Units will be informed. Take care not to damage any of the training structures, but please report any accidents that do happen. Some buildings have asbestos materials which are quite safe unless broken. Asbestos dust is the serious health hazard if inhaled, and troops should report broken asbestos to the 24-hour ops room and vacate the area. BAT-SIM charges are limited to 1/4 kilogram and must not be used within 400 metres of a public right-of-way unless special safety arrangements to deny public access are in place, or between 2300 hours and 0600 hours without authority from HQ SPTA. Another important safety issue is unexploded shells and other munitions. Areas which allow public access are checked, but there's always a risk because military firing has gone on for over 100 years on the plain. You could find an unexploded shell, mine or bomb that could still go off. So if you find something, don't touch it, mark it, and immediately notify the 24-hour ops room. When employing personnel in civilian clothes carrying weapons, the Range Administering Unit must be informed. All civilian white and grey fleet vehicles must clearly be marked as exercise vehicles. Mother Nature also provides some health risks. Animal ticks are common on the plain, and they can carry Lyme disease, which can infect humans and can be fatal. Where practical, keep your bare skin covered. If a tick bite displays a bullseye rash, seek medical attention immediately. The wild parsnip and hogweed can also cause rashes, so avoid coming into contact with these plants, and bear in mind sunlight can make the plant juices react with the skin. If affected, cover immediately and seek medical attention. If the worst does happen and there's an incident and there are casualties, remember to use the flowchart in your aid memoir. Everyone must be in possession of an aid memoir. Decide on services required. Inform the 24-hour ops room who will call emergency services. Inform the 24-hour ops room using the methane format. Establish an ICP if required. Meet emergency services at RV and control the incident. There can be several reasons why an area has been designated out of bounds. It could be dangerous, or there could be fragile archaeology or environmental reasons to protect it. Out-of-bounds areas are marked on the ground. They have signs like these. Some areas are signed for part of the year to protect nesting birds, like this plot for stone curlews. This is an archaeological site. It's clearly marked with signs and white top posts. In the past, some of these sites were severely damaged by driving heavy vehicles over them. Don't. Disturbing the designated ancient sites which are fully protected is an offence. The MOD is fully committed to protecting our entire historical heritage on the Salisbury Plain training area. With 58,000 acres of special scientific interest and 7 major underground water aquifers, pollution prevention and control measures are vital. You must ensure that your unit has a robust spillage response plan. You're reminded that it's an offence to damage the environment. All units must nominate a pollution control officer to coordinate the response to any spillages, and static running vehicles must use drip trays. All spills must be reported to the 24-hour ops room, and a spill rep is to be completed by the unit. And remember, the polluter pays. If a major spill occurs, then the MOD emergency response contractor is only to be tasked by the pollution control officer, deputy pollution control officer, or the duty officer through the 24-hour ops room. If the unit's spill response plan fails, TSMs can deploy to supervise cleanup operations. And in the event of a major spill, pollution control trailers capable of dealing with a 5,000 litre spill can be made available by HQ SPTA. All spills remain the unit's responsibility. Due to the risk of a major pollution incident, single-skinned refuelling vehicles are not permitted to drive off roads and stone tracks except with permission from the range administering unit. Latrines have been strategically placed around the main training features on the plane. They're marked on the 1 in 25,000 scale maps. Please don't place ammunition or rubbish in them. Toilet facilities can be augmented with portable latrines booked through the Landmark Service Coordinator, and all latrines are allocated on a 1 per 25 person basis. All users must incorporate a clean-up phase into their exercise, during which rubbish and military debris are collected, trenches filled in, and damage repaired. This process must be constantly supervised, and all rubbish is to be sorted, bagged, and removed from the training area. It's not to be buried or put in latrines. SPTA cannot provide skips, therefore all rubbish must be taken to the military recycling facility at West Down Camp in clear plastic bags. It's important to remember that rubbish is handed on to civilian operators for disposal, so any live munitions, expended ammunition, ammunition packaging, expended pyrotechnics or pyrotechnics must be separated from the rubbish before delivery to the West Down Military Recycling Facility and retained by the unit. Commanding officers will be informed if units do not comply. With the best will in the world, a major military exercise is bound to result in some damage. It's important to report all damage to the training area infrastructure to the National Service Centre in order to speed up repair and to reduce inconvenience to subsequent users. The damage report pro forma must be handed in to the 24-hour ops room, and your unit should have a DAMCON party which can repair minor damage and clean up military debris, such as mine tape, defence stores and road wheel rubber. So let's remind ourselves of the key points you need to remember. Only use areas allocated to your unit. Commanders must have a daily range summary and a marked map. All personnel are to have an SPTA aid memoir. Obey the signs. Be aware of difficult terrain, especially at night. Tank crossings are dangerous. It's essential that units use these crossings correctly. Keep within the speed limit. Clean up all mud on public roads. Remove military debris. Don't use pyrotechnics within 100 metres of a public right-of-way. And own up to mistakes. Finally, HQ SPTA manages the training area in a safe and sustainable way, so that we preserve the history and environment of the plane for future generations and continue to provide first-rate military training now and in the future. Thank you for watching.